Have you ever just stopped and thought, what was the very first word? The first word ever spoken by a person? It's honestly one of humanity's biggest, most fascinating unsolved mysteries, a question that has stumped people for literally centuries. So today, we're going to be detectives. We're opening up the case file to see where the clues lead.
So, let's get right to it. The big one. Where did this incredible, complicated, and totally human thing we call language even come from? We're going to follow the trail of evidence and check out all the major theories, one by one.
But before we dive into the theories, we really need to get our heads around this. Language is one of the things that makes us, well, us. It's the software that lets us think in really complex ways, build entire cultures, and pass down everything we know. It is truly a human mystery.
Okay, our first lead in this investigation is also the oldest one by a long shot. For thousands of years, people all over the world didn't think language was invented at all. They believed it was given. This is the divine source theory, the idea that language is a gift from a god or some other higher power.
And what's wild is just how common this belief is. You see it everywhere. In Islam, the Quran says that Allah himself taught Adam the names of everything. In Christianity, you have God giving Adam the job of naming all the animals. And in Hinduism, the goddess Sarasvati is credited with revealing Sanskrit to the world.
So, believing that language came from a divine source is one thing, but for centuries, some people got, well, a little obsessed. Rulers and scholars wanted to prove it. They were convinced there had to be one single, original, God-given language, and they were going to find it, even if it meant doing some pretty strange experiments.
Let's look at the case notes. Way back, around 600 BC, an Egyptian pharaoh named Psamatix supposedly isolated 2 babies with only a shepherd and some goats. The story goes, the first word they uttered was bekos, which just happens to be the Phrygian word for bread. Case closed, right? Phrygian is the original language. Well, not so fast. Flash forward 2,000 years and King James IV of Scotland tries a similar experiment. His isolated kids? They apparently started speaking Hebrew. So 2 experiments, 2 completely different answers.
And this is pretty much where this lead went cold, for a few big reasons. First, modern science has tragically shown us that kids who grow up in total isolation don't develop any language at all. Second, it's way more likely that kids were just mimicking the sounds they heard every day, like the bleating of goats. Doesn't bekos kind of sound like a goat? And finally, the fact that the experiments got totally different results was the nail in the coffin. This theory just didn't hold up.
So, with the divine source theory hitting a dead end, investigators had to turn to a new angle. Okay, so maybe language wasn't beamed down from above. Maybe it grew out of the world around us. Maybe we were just copying the sounds of nature itself.
This new line of thinking led to a whole bunch of theories with some pretty great names. You've got the bow wow theory, the idea that we started by imitating animal sounds, like moo or caw. Then there's the poo-poo theory, which points to instinctive little cries of emotion, like saying ouch when you're hurt or ugh when you're disgusted. You also have the ding-dong theory, where sounds are linked to objects, like crash, and the yo-heave-ho theory, which suggests it all started with grunts and chants people made while working together.
Now, these ideas all seemed kind of intuitive, right? They make sense on a gut level. But, and you knew there was a but coming, when linguists really started digging into them, this entire line of reasoning started to fall apart. I mean, the biggest problem with all these natural sound ideas is, where's the physical proof? There isn't any. But even more than that, they're just too simple. Language isn't just a list of words like buzz and ouch. How do you get from a simple moo to discussing abstract ideas like justice or freedom? Where does grammar come from? And if we all started by just imitating the same sounds, why in the world are there thousands of completely different languages? These theories just couldn't answer the big questions.
Okay, so the case was getting trickier. The investigation had to get a lot more sophisticated. The next big break came when researchers shifted their focus from just the sounds we hear to the way our entire bodies communicate, connecting our physical actions to the sounds we make.
Which brings us to something called the oral gesture theory. The core idea here is that our communication didn't start with sound at all. It started silently, with gestures from our hands and our bodies. The theory goes that, over a really long time, gestures we made with our mouths and tongues, maybe mimicking those hand movements, started to get paired with sounds, and eventually, those sounds evolved into the spoken words we all use today.
So let's walk through how this might have played out. Step 1. An early hunter points to show where the prey went. That's a physical gesture. Step 2. Maybe they start also using a mouth gesture, like pointing with their tongue to free up their hands for a spear. That's an oral gesture. Step 3. They add a little grunt or a sound to that tongue-pointing gesture.
Now imagine that process repeating and getting more complex over thousands and thousands of years, and you can see a possible pathway to language. It's a really compelling bridge between the physical and the verbal. And that brings us right up to the modern era of this whole investigation. Today, linguists are asking totally different kinds of questions. Honestly, they're less obsessed with finding that one first word and a lot more interested in how language is tangled up with the very fabric of our minds. So what are they looking at now? Well, really deep stuff, like how the language you speak actually shapes the way you think. For example, did you know that some languages don't have separate words for blue and green, and it can actually affect how speakers perceive color? They're also studying the incredible links between language and memory, and the huge role language plays in our social lives. It's a massive shift from asking, where did it start, to what does language even do for us as human beings? So after this long, winding investigation, where do we stand? What's the final verdict? Well, the simple truth is, the origin of language is still one of our great unsolved cases. The file is still very much open. There's no single theory that perfectly explains it all. And this really sums it up perfectly. Every single theory, even the flawed ones like Bow Wow, gives us another little piece of the puzzle. They show us a different clue about this incredible journey humans took from simple gestures and sounds to the incredibly complex systems we have today. So maybe, in the end, the big takeaway isn't about finding a definitive answer that's lost to time. The real value of this entire investigation is what it tells us about ourselves, right here, right now. It shows us just how deeply language shapes our thoughts, our communities, our entire world. It's the tool we use to build reality itself.
And you know, the story isn't over, not even close. Language is alive. It never stops changing. New words are born every day, old ones disappear. The way we talk to each other is always evolving. And that leaves us with one last huge, fascinating question to think about. If this is where language came from, where is it going next? What will we be saying 1,000 years from now?